No. And we're live! Yay! Welcome, Gerri. Everybody on
Oh,
Facebook, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with Gerri and I today. Gerri Detweiler is here with me. You guys already know me. I'm Liz Teresa. Gerri works with NAV. And Gerri, I'd love for you to introduce yourself first and tell everybody what NAV is, because I love NAV. I'm a big NAV fan. But tell everybody what it
oh,
is that doesn't know.
well, thank you, Liz. Thanks for having me back. I was on your podcast, what, a year ago? And it feels like a whole other world. You were pregnant. You didn't have a baby then.
No.
And we didn't have all of this then. So, yeah,
And
what a different world.
this is a whole lot.
Yes, it's a whole lot.
Yes.
So NAV is the easiest way to think of us is we're like Credit Karma, but for small business. So
Okay.
we're the place you go as a business owner to check and monitor your business credit reports and scores for free. We also give you free personal credit monitoring through Experian. And then our main goal is to help make it easier to find financing for your business. So we'll match you to financing offers. We don't sell your information to lenders, but we'll show you what's out there, help you understand how to qualify, and hopefully get you on the path to better financing as you grow your business.
And I want to ask you this before we get into all this, like the crazy, because you've been wicked busy lately, understandably. But like before we get into all these crazy, I call it like COVID alphabet soup with like how many like different letters stand for things with all this stuff. Who's ready for business credit? Like, how do you know when you're ready to go have like a Credit Karma? Because that's what NAV is. How do you know when
Right.
you're ready to know that you have business credit if you're just starting? Are you ready when you're starting?
Right. That's a great question. So the first thing is you can check and see if you have a business credit report with Dun& Bradstreet, Experian, and Equifax. Those are the three main ones. Those are the ones we monitor. And you might, if you have, let's say, a small business credit card, certain vendor relationships. Many businesses, though, don't have business credit. So what we try to do is help them build business credit. And just like your personal credit, it doesn't happen automatically. It doesn't happen overnight. So the sooner you start, the better off you are. Because just like personal credit, that long credit history will help, and it can help you move away as your business matures, move away from risky personal guarantees so that you can borrow in the name of your business and
Right.
stop using your personal credit.
And also something that I remember from when we spoke that really stayed with me, and then like I said, I want to get to the small business relief, is that you said it's good to have a profile on NAV simply because there's so much business credit fraud. Because like it's so easy, it's easier because it's less regulated for bad people in the world to go pretend to be Liz Teresa the business and buy houses and probably do things. Probably not buy houses,
Yeah.
but you know what I mean. Hopefully they don't
Yeah, it
make it
comes
that
close
far.
though.
Oh
Oh, it
man.
comes close. No,
Mm.
there's been some research. It can be big time fraud because
Yeah.
business owners aren't checking. So you
Yeah.
may not even know this is happening behind your back. So yes, even if it's just for fraud prevention, monitoring your business credit can be really helpful. And of course, right now there's so many scams with COVID related scams
Mm.
that it's a really important time to be monitoring your credit, business and personal.
Okay, that's such good information. And you guys, if you want to check out NAV while we're talking, I'm not offended. It's nav.com, right? Is that where they go? And then
That's right.
there's a code podcast. I know that gives you something. That's some kind of promotion.
Yes.
I don't remember what it is. It's a good one though.
Right. Yeah. nav.com/podcast.
Okay.
And that will take you to our podcast page. There's a coupon code for podcast to get a free month of NAV Premium. You can also there download our build business credit checklist. And you don't even have to give us an email address. You can just download it right there. And if you're curious about the process of building business credit, you feel like, oh, this is a good time to do something like this
Oh
for my
yeah.
business. Then you can just follow those steps, and it's pretty easy. Just have to be proactive.
Okay, cool. Well, so there's a lot of alphabet soup, as I said before, but like not the delicious kind. Although I don't think alphabet soup was ever that good. But there's the PPP. I'm thinking about all the COVID small business relief acronyms I've seen, so there might be more. But the PUA, the PPP, the EIDL. Are there any other ones? And can you tell us a little bit about it?
So
Yeah.
with unemployment, there's PUA,
Okay.
PUC, and PUE. So it's kind
PU.
of well, no, the PEU, pandemic emergency. Oh,
Okay.
I have to look at my article again.
Yeah.
So the main two loan programs for small business are the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or EIDL, as I call it, EIDL. And then the other one is the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP loan. So EIDL has been around before this all happened because it's part of the disaster loan program that the SBA has, which, can include physical disasters like fires, floods, tornadoes, things like that. So that program's been around for a long time. And there is this version of disaster loans called economic injury disaster loans. And so that became available nationwide a few weeks before the CARES Act was passed. But then what the CARES Act did, that was that law that included the unemployment or stimulus checks, some payroll tax credits for businesses, a whole bunch of things. It included PPP, and it also included a grant associated with EIDL. And so the idea with the grant is to get money into the hands of business owners quickly, those who apply for EIDL. And it was supposed to be 3 days after application. That never happened. The fastest we saw people getting advances probably about 3 weeks after application. And then because of the demand, the SBA limited it. It was the legislation is written not more than $10,000. Instead, they decided to do it $1,000 per employee. So that was disappointing for businesses that maybe are just a solopreneur because they would get $1,000 for the grant as opposed to the $10,000 that they thought they would get. But nevertheless, that's money that doesn't have to be repaid. And then after the grant, then at some point, you get notified by SBA as to whether you qualify for the loan. And so the economic injury disaster loan is not a forgivable loan. It's just a loan, but it's low interest, 3.75%. And you can use it for working capital needs for your business. So it's a lot broader than PPP, which is mainly aimed at payroll. So right now, I'll just give a quick update. Do you want me to give a quick update on EIDL?
No, definitely.
Okay, so EIDL closed the portal. You can only apply for that through the SBA. So I know there's a ton of confusion. People will say I applied for EIDL through my bank, or I applied through PPP through the SBA. And if you applied at sba.gov to the SBA, you applied for EIDL.
Okay.
That's the only place to get it is on the SBA website. Now, they closed the portal a couple weeks ago when they ran out of funding because they had such a backlog. And then Congress authorized an additional $60 billion in funding, but they did not reopen the portal until yesterday, and they only reopened it for certain agricultural businesses. So there were some agricultural businesses that weren't able to apply in the first round, and so they allowed them to start applying again yesterday. But if you didn't apply for EIDL, then unfortunately right now that portal is closed. But if you did, and there's a lot of people still waiting, I'll just give a quick overview of the process. What happens is the money from the grant shows up in your bank account. Like no notice or anything. It just shows up. Again, one person business will get $1,000. 3 employee business will get $3,000. And then sometime after that, you'll get an email from the SBA that will talk about a loan if you're offered a loan. So the loans can go up to $2 million. And they're designed for you to pay the working capital expenses your business would have been able to pay if the disaster hadn't occurred. Mm-hmm. So for those who are home-based, there's probably fewer expenses, but you can use it for your own payroll if you're doing the work. You can't use it as distributions. You can't just pay yourself. But if you're doing work for your own business, even if it's just, working on building up your social media accounts or whatever it may be, or paying a contractor, an independent contractor who works for you, you can use it for those types of purposes. And so that money can be useful just to get you through this hump. So one big tip I want to give with EIDL is, 2 tips. Yeah. One is check your spam folder.
Okay.
I said this to a friend
What a simple tip, but right?
Yeah, no, because I have a friend who she had applied for EIDL. She never heard anything. Her sister had applied for EIDL, never heard anything. I told her this tip, and she called me later, and she said, we both found it in our spam folder.
Wow.
So there was a message from the SBA that they hadn't seen. So check your spam folder for a message from the SBA. Make sure it's from the SBA and it's not a spoof, make sure it's sba.gov. But if it is, then that may give you information on the status of your loan. And then you can always decide not to take the loan. Like you could just take the grant and just say no thanks to the loan. That's perfectly acceptable. So, but what I find is for a lot of businesses, PPP and EIDL kind of work hand in hand. So they use PPP mainly for payroll, but then they use EIDL for those other expenses that the business needs to pay. So it can be a very complementary program. So that's the overview of where we are on EIDL. Can you think of any questions as you've heard that I
Well, I
So with
think
that,
yeah, around idle too. I think what I'm gravitating to about it is that it can help solopreneurs, which I like because a lot of my people are just small business owners where like it's either just them that works there and then they have contractors, or they might have a small team where they might want to go into PPP territory a little bit. But what I like hearing is that they're not mutually exclusive, that like these things can work together, so that part is good. I think I'm wondering, how do you demonstrate need? Like, so how does that come up when you're applying? Do you have to like, let's say for example you're a business and maybe you're not struggling like as hard as another business, like a restaurant for example, or like a hair salon, right? Or I'm just thinking about that as an example. Like restaurants are still open and they're struggling, and hair salons are closed and have nothing. So yeah, who are you still going to all get the 1,000, or does it really depend on how much you're hurting?
The only reason you may not get the grant is credit. And I wrote an article about this because it makes no sense to me whatsoever that the grant is being denied for credit.
Yeah.
So with EIDL, there is a credit check because it's a loan, right? It's a loan. And if you don't pay it back, ultimately taxpayers pay for it, right? Because the money comes from the SBA, basically comes from us as taxpayers. Mm-hmm. So there is acceptable credit required, but the grant doesn't have to be repaid. So when this grant launched, I never expected that business owners would be turned down for the grant based on credit. I'm utterly shocked to discover that is happening. And I recently wrote an article about that. So that would be the only reason that you might be declined for the grant, unless they just determine you're not eligible at all for EIDL. But basically, it's a weird application because you don't put down how much you want or how much you need. You just put down. Yeah, you just put down your gross revenues for the last, I think it's 12 months, and then you put down your cost of goods sold, which for a home-based business might be your operating expenses, and then they use a formula to determine, how much your business may need. They might ask for tax returns or other data to help them substantiate how much you need. But you mentioned contractors, and I think that one is really important because PPP does not allow you to include independent contractors in your calculations for eligibility. And so I've heard from so many businesses where they're a 1 or 2 person business and they rely on independent contractors, but they can't get money through PPP to pay the contractors. The contractors are supposed to apply on their own. Well, that's well and good for the contractor, but how does that help you pay your contractors? It doesn't, right? I mean, do you expect them to work for free for you? It doesn't make sense from that perspective. So EIDL can help you pay your contractors. So keep that in mind. If you were normally having to pay these bills, these contractors, for the person who manages your social media, for example, or the person who provides other services for your business, then that can be included in your EIDL funds.
So this is interesting because then it tells me that you really should apply for EIDL anyway, because there's a grant, and then you could always say no if you don't want the loan. And then you said it goes off of credit. Does it go off of if you don't have established business credit? So if you don't have a NAV account, for example, and you don't know what your business credit profile is, does it just go off your personal credit?
Yeah, and let me just add that right now, reminder, the portal is closed unless you're an agricultural business. Yes. So hopefully we're talking to people who've already applied and are wondering what the heck, why haven't I heard anything, or what's going to happen to my application?
Yeah.
So with credit, they check personal credit through Experian, and there's no minimum credit score requirement. It's just acceptable credit. So they make a determination of whether it's acceptable. And I wrote a lot about this in an FAQ about EIDL if someone's curious. And then for business credit, they check business credit if the loan amount that they plan to give you is $200,000 or more. Okay. And you're not a sole proprietor. So if you have a business and you're going to get a larger loan amount, then a business credit check through Dun & Bradstreet would take place.
Okay, cool. No, thank you for clearing that up. And do you think that EIDL will reopen to more than just agricultural folks? Do you think it's going to be a rolling situation where they open it up to different things?
I mean, it's very possible that the requests they have now would deplete the authorization that Congress has given. But I'm hoping that we'll see that or something like that in another round of aid for small businesses. Because, Liz, so many businesses I've talked to said, PPP is not what I need. I have these other financial needs that I can't get traditional financing. And really, that's what SBA has always been about, right? It's about providing loans to businesses that can't get credit elsewhere, but are still considered a good credit risk. And so I really hope we see more money, more funding, and more transparency around the EIDL process.
So then there's PPP, like you were talking about, and so PPP is only available to businesses that have like a structured payroll in place, so not people that have contractors, right?
Well, not exactly.
Okay.
So you can be self-employed and you can qualify for the money that you need to pay yourself in your business.
Okay.
The SBA and Treasury were very late in coming out with the rules for self-employed. These are people who file Schedule C. So if you're self-employed, there's a good chance you file a Schedule C, which reports your business income, your net profit, to the IRS, and you file that with your own 1040, right? So it's attached to that. On that form, there's a line 31, and that's where it's sort of like that line on your personal tax return that says, here's your adjusted gross income.
Yes.
So here's how much we know how to. That line explains to the IRS how much you made in your business. It's your net profit or net loss. And so if you made a profit in 2019, then you take that line, that number on line 31. You divide it by 12 so you can get your average monthly, and then you multiply it by 2.5 because PPP is for 2.5 times average monthly payroll. And the way payroll is determined if you file Schedule C is that net profit. So let's say you ended up with a average monthly profit of $5,000, per month last year in 2019, then you could be eligible for $12,500 under PPP. And you can use most of that to pay yourself, as long as you're actually providing services for your business. And actually with PPP, I don't even think you have to prove that with PPP because it's a little bit different. Now, there is one tricky angle I'm going to add here real quick, and that's if you are an S Corp or if you pay yourself like distributions from your business. So I had my own business for many years, and I still have my S Corp, but the way I paid myself was I had a certain salary that I paid every single month, and I paid payroll FICA taxes on that salary. And then when my business did well, I would take additional money out in the form of distributions or owner's draw, you call it, right?
Yeah.
It's money you don't have to pay payroll taxes on. And the SBA, we do have an email from the SBA that did say not to include the owner's draw or those distributions in your payroll calculations. So that's just something to keep in mind if that's how you operate your independent business or your small business. But fortunately, about a week and a half ago, they came out with a guide to how to calculate your PPP amount by business structure. Until then, we were really trying to figure it out the best we could. It wasn't very clear at all. This is pretty clear. So if you have any questions, like if you already applied for PPP, you got PPP, you're not sure if you used the right amount, you might want to go back and review that, because the whole point of PPP is to keep employees on payroll, and that can include yourself. And then after 8 weeks, apply and get that forgiven, so that you don't have to make a single payment on this loan. Well, if you got too much because you didn't really understand it, it wasn't clear how to apply, it's okay. I mean, that they've said you can rely on that previous guidance, but some of that might not be forgiven. And so you might want to talk to your lender about repaying it. Any amounts that are not forgiven will be turned into a 1% loan with a 2-year repayment term. So there are details you really do want to pay attention to. So anyone who has gotten PPP or has applied for PPP and is waiting for it, I'd encourage you to understand the rules around forgiveness, because that's the main draw, right? Is that you don't have to pay this back, and you want to do it right.
And I was going to ask you, so you have to, it's not that it's automatically forgiven, it's that you have to apply for the forgiveness to happen once you get
Correct.
it. Okay.
Correct. So you will apply through your lender. And it's, again, we need more guidance on this.
Yeah.
We're begging the SBA and Treasury to please give us more information on how forgiveness works. They're sort of giving it in drips and drabs.
Yeah.
But the basic idea is after that money hits your account, you have 8 weeks to spend it. And if you spend most of it, at least 75% on payroll and up to 25% on other qualified expenses, mortgage interest, rent, and utilities for the business, then you apply to your lender and apply to get it forgiven. But you can have the amount reduced. If you don't bring people back to work, for example, if you reduce salaries too much or headcount too much, the amount you can have forgiven can be reduced. And so that's very confusing for many restaurant owners, many businesses where the employees want to stay on unemployment because they feel like they're going to make more on unemployment. That's creating a lot of headaches for some of these small business owners. So you do want to pay attention to that.
That's wicked helpful, because I think I appreciate this, because now I'm actually understanding how these things work. I'm hearing a lot that folks that have applied for PPP aren't hearing back from their bank. And that's happening with some of my own clients, is that like they will have applied and then it's like crickets. And so in those situations, is it best for them to reapply through like something random? And by random, I mean like I see Square and PayPal are now like, hey, come to us and we'll get you PPP like funding. And what should they do in that situation?
Yeah. So at NAV, we've been matching borrowers to PPP lenders, and we have been encouraging business owners to apply at multiple places just because you don't know who's going to move faster. Now, there's some pros and cons to that. Sometimes it ends up, one lender sees it as a duplicate, because here's what happens, Liz. So for everybody who's wondering what's going on right now, we're in round 2 of PPP, right? And we expected the money to go much more quickly than it has. So we're not sure what all is happening, but every single one of those applications has to go through the SBA to get an SBA loan number. That's the approval. That's the SBA saying, okay. And so your lender gathers all the documents from you. They try to get it ready to go so it's best chance at getting approved. And then it goes through the SBA, because the SBA is keeping track of how much funding Congress has authorized, right? And so when these loans get approved, that it draws down from that money that's approved. So once the SBA number is given, then you are officially approved by the SBA, and then your lender has 10 calendar days to fund that loan. So at that point, you should get some documents from the lender. You're going to sign off accepting the loan, and then they have 10 days to fund. Many lenders are funding in about 72 hours, depending on the lender. So what you're looking for, that SBA number, right, or SBA approval number, or SBA approval, however the lender calls it. Now, I've gotten quite a few comments from people who said they have been turned down through PayPal due to credit, which is interesting because. Yeah. Credit does not appear to be a requirement. It is not a requirement of PPP, which is unusual, because usually SBA loans definitely check credit, right? So that's unusual in itself. But generally with SBA, a lender is allowed to, they are allowed to add on requirements as long as they don't discriminate. And so credit, at least in that case, it appears that credit is a factor. And maybe they're just concerned that businesses won't end up with forgiveness, and then it's a loan and they want to make sure the loan gets repaid. They do have a guarantee from the SBA, 100% guarantee. So I'm not sure where all that's coming in, but it may be a factor. But for most people, PPP will not require you to have good credit. So the main reasons you'd be turned down is like you aren't eligible. And I've seen this with small business owners who didn't understand how to qualify as self-employed. So they maybe sent in their 2018 tax return and it showed a no profit. That line 31 was not a positive number, or it was so small that there wasn't even really a loan amount that could be given. So that could get you turned down for PPP, and then just not filling out all the documents. So really giving the lender all the documents that they need, even though it's kind of a pain, is really essential as well.
No, and I even I can appreciate that. And so it sounds like people that haven't heard back, or if you haven't got a number, it's okay to apply more than once, I think.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it's possible that another lender could then go and submit your application and say, oh, well, we already saw an SBA approval, so we can't approve this. Okay. And it is more time for the lenders, unfortunately, because they don't know. But the problem is, each of these lenders are basically fighting for those slots to get their borrowers approved. Yeah. And so it is a little bit hard, and you do hit up against lending limits at some, especially large banks, where they may have a lot of larger dollar loan amounts coming through their small business customers who are bigger small businesses.
Right.
And so, trying to figure out where you fit, it's it's not the easiest thing in the world. So it's not a true first come, first serve type of scenario. So that's why we've encouraged business owners to apply at multiple sources. And at NAV, we're still helping match people to PPP lenders. So at least as of today, let's see, we're talking on May 5th, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
As of right now, it's not too late to apply. We don't know when they're going to announce that those funds, but I think the last number I saw was like 175 billion out of the 310 billion that were authorized has been spoken for. So there's still some money available.
That's good. And I mean, I even hope, because I mean, when you think about this thing from like a broad picture, right? You would assume, or you'd really hope that there's going to be more support coming for small business owners, because I don't know when this is really going to end. Like, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know. And you have to be okay with that. I put that in air quotes because, you know, you do your best. But yeah, no, thank you for clarifying PPP. So we've talked about PPP, EIDL. I like IDLE. That sounds nicer. So IDLE. And then there's also all the PUs. Because then there's
all the PUs.
All the
PUs. The pandemic unemployment. Yeah. So the basic nutshell for pandemic, and I do want everyone who's watching to understand, PPP may not be right for your business, right?
Yeah.
So unemployment may be a better option. The problem with unemployment is that it's administered through the states. Mm-hmm. States have never been set up to handle unemployment for the self-employed, because that's never been a qualifier, at least in most cases. You could have a business that, you know, like I did, where you're paying payroll and you might be eligible, but for the most part, unemployment has not been designed for the self-employed, right? So pandemic unemployment assistance expanded unemployment to groups of people that include the self-employed. It can also include people who like have to stay home to take care of a child who's out of school due to coronavirus, other situations. And then it had this other pandemic unemployment compensation, PUC, that adds an additional $600 a week from the federal government through July 31st of 2020. And then there's a further extension of pandemic unemployment, which comes through your state. So here's the basic gist of it. You apply for it through your state. And how good your state is doing with it depends on where you live. I live in Florida. They're doing a terrible job. I mean, I can tell you right now, I think they've approved something like less than 10% of all unemployment applications altogether. It took them forever to get the unemployment or the self-employed option up. And our benefits are so low in Florida, $275 a week, that it was like, even for self-employed people, It was hard to qualify. Some states have much better unemployment benefits. So, and what you're going to have to provide as being self-employed your state is going to tell you, here's what we need to see. But the biggest thing I can say with all of these programs, all of them, is that you need to be current on your business information. You know, if you saw that Congress said, oh, you don't have to file your 2019 tax return until later, and you said, great, I'm not going to catch up on my bookkeeping, and I don't even know, I don't even have last June of 2019 done, you're going to be in trouble, because even for PPP, you need that information. You don't have to file 2019, but you need that information from your Schedule C to figure out how much you qualify for. And pandemic unemployment, you're probably going to need some information. You might need 1099s as a contractor, different things to verify it. But I would strongly urge you to take this time. And I know it's not easy because everybody's scrambling. There are kids at home. There's a million other things to do. But catching up on those numbers is going to help you no matter which one, you apply for. And then I would try to weigh PPP versus unemployment and also just get a sense. And I'll tell you, the New York Times is publishing some great information about where all the states are with this.
Yeah.
So you can look and see what's going on in your state. Look at the state portal to see what they're saying about applying if you're self-employed, and get an idea of whether that might be the right option for you instead of going the PPP route.
And how long, I guess, would you only collect it if you're in a business when you're not actually working? Because there are some people that have for example, if you're an event planner, I'm just thinking about this, and let's say you're obviously not hosting events right now, and so maybe you lost all your clients, but then you're like, oh, but I'm kind of good at social media, so I'm going to sell social media services during this weird time. Can I still apply for PUA?
Yeah, you
in
may
work?
still be able to apply. So
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do any work because there are some benefits available for reduction. The other thing is,
Okay.
Liz, like if your kids are home from school
Hmm.
and you have to be their caregiver during this time and you just can't work for your clients as you normally did, that may qualify you for this these pandemic unemployment programs as well. Or if you're caring for a family member who has been, who is ill, you're ill, you've been told by your medical provider quarantine, you can't telework with pay. There's a whole list of circumstances that
Mm.
may apply. And so I wouldn't rule it out. I
Yeah.
would definitely look at it. And B, if you got rejected early on because you were self-employed, try again because there were a lot of people who couldn't even get into the portal or were rejected out of hand because they didn't fit the traditional, unemployment
Right.
description of someone who has a W-2 employer, right? And so I would definitely go back and look again and see you have the right to appeal and see what you need to do to reapply. I've heard from so many people who
Mm.
have been reapplying because their state just wasn't set up to handle it well.
And I even think I think a lot of this too, it's like hearing that you can just try again. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're
Yeah.
not hearing back to not assume no, you know?
Yes, yes, yes. And I know it's discouraging, it's time consuming, it's frustrating. I get all that. We're fighting for our businesses right now. I
Yeah.
mean, many people are, of course, fighting for their lives, but many of us are fighting for, the business owner. And so let's look at, all the options out there and really, exhaust your capabilities. The other thing is I've been telling people to do is, if you're not someone who has ever called your senators or a representative in
Yeah.
Washington and you're having problems with any of these programs, these are federal programs. I started my career, well, I was an intern way back when on Capitol Hill for a senator, and my job was a caseworker, basically. So what would happen is, constituents would say, I have this problem with the IRS or this problem with Social Security, and I would have to contact them and try to help them resolve the problem, right? They have people on staff to do this. And
Yeah.
they're overwhelmed too, so be nice, but let them know, the problems you're having because unless you do, everybody's going to assume, oh, this is working just as we had envisioned it. And they're not going to realize that, hey, next round or even in the next few weeks, we need to issue guidance or we need to change something or we need to consider
Mm.
something different in the next round. You have to be your advocate at this point.
I think that's good advice in any situation, even. Like you have to be your advocate. And I think people don't do that enough is call their governor or call their attorney general or call somebody,
Yeah,
and just be like, this is the problem that I'm facing. Cause it's nice to hear that there are people that are there to help you. Like
that's their job.
we forget
Yes.
that. I
Yeah.
think I think I called a congressperson once because I'm in Massachusetts, and there was a time that we didn't have power, I think for 6 or 7 days, and it was there's no heat, so then I had to pay for a hotel to put my parents in. And I was so mad because I'm like, just go plug in their house. What's wrong with you? I mean, I was mad. So I called everybody. But they were nice. Like if you're nice, they'll actually try to help you. And my parents' lights came back on. So it worked out. Yeah. No,
Good.
Gerri, this has been so, so good. I can't think of other questions that I could ask you because I feel like I have pretty good clarity around what these things are. But where can people get in touch with you if they do have questions?
So nav.com
Yes.
/blog, and we're writing about all these topics. So if you read my article about unemployment insurance for the self-employed, you have a question, you post it on the blog, and I will do my best to answer. Same thing with the PPP and with EIDL. My colleague Ty Kiesel and I have been writing extensively on this, and we'll do our best to answer that. We also have a Facebook group, the SBA CARES Act Insight Hub, I think is what it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really popular. We have people talking about their experiences. So, for example, someone will go on there and say, here's my application number from the SBA, and I just got my grant. And then everybody will be looking at their application numbers because it's first come, first serve, right? So they're trying to see, how close am I to that number? Maybe that means I'm getting closer to having my application reviewed. So those kind of insights just from other business owners. That's where we first learned about people being turned down for PPP from PayPal because of credit. So those insights can be really helpful too.
Very interesting. Thank you so much, Gerri, for joining us today.
Thank you. I so appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for watching with us.